Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to this week's roundup. I've got 4 stories for you today, starting with Lewis Hamilton, who believes that when racing returns, drivers might take a little bit of time to get up to speed. In fact, his exact words were that drivers would be rusty as hell. Now, we haven't seen a Grand Prix since Abu Dhabi on December 1st last year. That's half a year ago, by the way. And drivers won't be on track again until July the 5th at the very earliest. In a video posted on the Mercedes YouTube channel, which I will link below, Hamilton gave his take on the impact the long break will have on drivers, and also how they can all prepare to go racing once again. I do hope to come back better, but we are going to get in the car and we are going to probably have Friday practice, and we will all be rusty as hell. So it'll be really interesting to see how we hit the ground running. I've been on the phone with my team, speaking to Bono, speaking to James, and trying to discuss with them a plan of how I want to arrive. Lewis added to that by saying that the goal is to try and arrive in Austria, if that is to be the first race, of course, as if he had already competed in 8 races this year, but admitted that he wasn't sure it would be possible. I think we all need to make sure that we arrive utilising the tools we have. I probably will get in the simulator, which I don't really always love, but utilising those tools to make sure that when we come to that first race, we hit the ground running, we're ready as if we've not missed any of the races. How can we arrive in Austria like we've already done 8 races? That's going to be a challenge. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it, but it's a good goal to have. At time of recording, there has been no official word on a provisional 2020 calendar, although, as covered during last Sunday's livestream, it is believed that the current plan is for the season to start with a doubleheader in Austria on July 5th and July 12th, with 2 races at Silverstone following on from that. However, that is obviously dependent on whether or not sport will be exempt from the UK government's planned 14-day quarantine period for people arriving in the country, which it looks as though, if we believe the reports, it's not going to be exempt. So should that be the case, it is reported that Hockenheim or the Hungaroring are the circuits that could fill Silverstone's spot on any revised calendar. If we get any news regarding that quarantine period from today's briefing, I will pin an update in the comment section down below. Next up, Carlos Sainz is putting all thoughts about his move to Ferrari next year to the back of his mind and says he is fully focused on McLaren for 2020. In case you didn't know, it was announced last week that Sebastian Vettel will be leaving Ferrari at the end of this year, and Carlos Sainz is going to be taking the seat vacated by the German, with the Spaniard signing a 2-year deal with the team. But obviously, there is still potentially a 2020 season to squeeze in before he makes that switch, and in an interview with Sky Italia, Sainz said that McLaren are very much the priority. I want to go back to Woking and start working again. I thought that after my announcement someone could get sick, and instead I received many messages of affection and esteem. I want to repay everything. I know that here in Spain they are already thinking about 2021 to see me behind the wheel of a Ferrari fighting for podiums and victories. But now I want to put Ferrari in the draw for a moment and think only of McLaren. In that same interview, Sainz spoke about how strange it was to engage in negotiations with Ferrari without actually coming face to face with anyone from the team. It has been a very special week. Negotiating without ever seeing each other is a strange thing. I was at home with my father and in constant contact with my agent, and in the end we did quite well. It's not the most thrilling line, I know that, but I wanted to include it, especially the did quite well bit. Carlos, you gotta move to Ferrari. I'd say that went very well. And I must admit that I am actually very excited for 2021 and seeing how he does up against Charles Leclerc. It's going to be fascinating to see how that all works out between them. And my gut feeling right now is that Sainz may well do better than many are predicting. And just sticking with this story, specifically McLaren, it is worth a brief mention that their head of strategy, Randeep Singh, has said that although it is sad to see Sainz leave, the team are very much looking forward to welcoming Daniel Ricciardo, a driver he has enormous respect for. Honestly, 2021 will be so fascinating when it comes to teammate battles. I can't wait, but let's get 2020 out of the way first. FIA President Jean Todt has said that criticism levelled at Formula 1 for the way they handled the developing situation in Australia was unfair. Back in March, the Australian Grand Prix was all set to go ahead. However, after a member of McLaren's crew tested positive for the virus, the team decided they had no option but to withdraw from the event, and that threw the entire weekend into doubt. Meetings took place after that with disagreement behind the scenes on whether or not the race should go ahead, with some reports claiming, and indeed Christian Horner pretty much backing it up to be fair, that 4 teams wanted to race and 6 didn't think it was the right thing to do. In the end, the event was called off, but Todd feels that because of how quickly the situation was evolving, the criticism the sport received was unfair. I think it is very unfair to attach blame to what happened in Australia. Things were moving so quickly. 24 hours before the start of free practice, there was no reason not to do the event. The government was in favour of hosting the event and the organisers were also in favour. Then, slowly, one event behind another one meant that opinion became divided. So from no problem to some problems which became bigger and bigger, and a few minutes before the start of free practice, it was simply not possible anymore. All those who 24 hours before were completely in favour changed their minds because of the acceleration of what was happening. Todt did go on to add though that the FIA have experts in place working on ways to prevent a similar situation occurring should the teams all arrive in Austria ready for the start of the season as is currently planned. On this, I am simply going to repeat what I said at the time. Whilst I completely understand that it was an unprecedented situation and things were absolutely evolving so quickly, it was clear to many people that as soon as McLaren withdrew and there was a positive case of the virus in the paddock, the event was at the very least in doubt. My frustration was that fans were allowed to arrive at the circuit and gather in those large crowds that we saw outside the gates. At that point, any decision taken is too late. Yes, it was the middle of the night, and so perhaps a decision couldn't have been made any sooner. But in my opinion, fans could and should have been told to stay away. Just something like a little press release that said, sorry, but at the very least Friday will be behind closed doors. Fans shouldn't come to the circuit, we'll update you all soon. Just something like that. Keep the fans away while the decision is being made. That's my frustration and where my criticism comes from. Personally, I think that they deserve at least some of the criticism they received, but equally, given all the legal stuff they'd have to go through behind the scenes and how complicated it would have become, I would not have wanted to be in their position. Like I say, the contracts, the legal ramifications, that's not easy stuff to deal with, but it could have been handled better when it came to the fans. And finally, in slightly lighter news, Nicholas Latifi reckons that Formula 1 should consider awarding points to the driver who claims pole position at each race weekend. Now, Formula 1 has never awarded points for pole position before, but it is commonplace in many other categories, including F1's feeder series F2 and F3, where 4 points are awarded to the driver who takes the top spot in qualifying. And that's a number that Latifi thinks is perhaps a little bit too high, but he is all for the idea of something being awarded for what he describes as one of the most difficult parts of racing. I think for sure there should be points given out for qualifying, at least 2 points, kind of like they do for pole position for Formula 2. I think F2 give out too many points, 4 points is quite a lot. Qualifying is one of the most difficult parts of racing in general, and if you get on pole you should be awarded for that in my opinion. So I'd say give at least 2 points for pole positions. That's not all he changed though, and the Canadian brought up the topic of reverse grid races, something that he feels would be a great way to spice up race weekends. That would be cool, it would only add to the excitement of a race weekend. Reverse grids in Formula 2, they're really fun, chaotic and unpredictable. Maybe even a larger portion of reverse grid. In F2 it's only the top 8. On that, Latifi suggested that F1 could look at reversing the top 10, the top 15, or even flipping the entire grid on its head. That would certainly make things very interesting. Now, the idea of points for pole position isn't something I'm personally on board with, although it would absolutely be one way to reward the driver who puts in that epic pole lap. I hate the idea that those handful of points could decide a world championship. If a title is decided on a Saturday, it would remove the tension from any potential title fight during the race on Sunday, and frankly, I'd rather watch 2 title rivals go wheel to wheel on track during a race. Plus, there are so many variables in qualifying as well. If a yellow flag comes out during a hot lap in quali, and that costs someone pole position and ultimately the title, it's just not something I'd want to see. It doesn't sit easy with me. And as for reverse grids, again, it would spice things up, but I actually really like F1's weekend format. Maybe that's a case of me being stuck in my ways, but I don't think reverse grids are something that are needed, especially if the 2022 regulations do work as intended. But what do you guys think? This is, unsurprisingly, the topic for today's question. Ultimately, do you agree with Nicholas Latifi? Would you like to see points awarded for pole position? And how do you feel about the idea of running reverse grid races? You can, as ever, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. That is it though for this video. Now, I will be back next week with some more content as ever, probably around Tuesday. But in the meantime, don't forget that you can of course follow me over on social media, and all of the links you need for that are in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching, and I will catch you again in the next one. Bye bye.